Okay. So I'm Jessie. I'm a student in political science and social justice studies. And in my spare time, which is not a lot, I participate in a lot of environmental and social activism, currently doing an internship with Greenpeace and planning a march against pipelines. It's going to take place for 34 days along the proposed route of TransCanada's Energy East pipeline in Quebec.
Cool. So can you talk a little bit more about that march, like how it started, or where did the idea for it come from?
Yeah, so it's the People's March for Mother Earth. Came out of an interactive theatre group that went around Quebec along the Line 9, which is Enbridge's proposed pipeline, to like communicate with communities along that would be affected by the pipeline, to see kind of what did they talk about? Pipeline projects and like the it's all in French, and militantism, and kind of how like that's been diminished in the past. And what they kind of heard come out of that is that a lot of the activists felt really like secluded in their communities, defending and opposing the pipelines, instead of having these connections between all these communities that were fighting against the pipelines. So
you're establishing like connections between
that's part
the
of
different communities.
Part of the goal is that the theater group came out with what can we do to like create these links that of the complaints that had been coming out from these theater productions, and so they decided to do a march. And the locations changed and expanded. So it became like 33 communities that we're going to pass through and be able to talk with.
Can you talk a little bit more about the pipelines? Just like explain what's really happening?
So in Quebec, there's 2 pipeline projects that are proposed. There's Enbridge's and Line 9, which is goes from Ontario to the refineries in Montreal. And the other one is TransCanada's Energy East pipeline. And that one goes all the way from Alberta, the tar sands, all the way through Quebec to Fredericton in New Brunswick. And that one is I think it might be the longest pipeline in the world that's proposed. And part of it is already constructed, and they want to expand it, and then the rest would have to be constructed. And all through Quebec, there's no pipelines.
And it's going through people's
It's going to go through people's communities. It's going to pass 3 major rivers in Quebec that would essentially affect like the water sources to Montreal and other surrounding communities.
Do you know like how exactly, like what does it do?
The pipeline? Well, I mean, part of the project is to like dig underground and like open up a way to like pass the pipeline. Pipelines like are a bunch of connecting cylinders, right? So all along you have these spots that are able to leak, and repeatedly with TransCanada, I think they've had nine pipelines leak in the last year, even though they say they'll have one every 12 years. Like the ratio of what they say and is actually true is ridiculously different. But on top of it, there's such a danger. It's not if this pipeline is going to spill, it's when this pipeline is going to spill, and like in what community and who is it going to affect. And essentially it's going to affect all of us, because it ends up leaking into the soil, it ends up leaking into the water, it ends up evaporating into the air and toxifying our air. And in that, like, even if it's not your soil in your community, it might be your like local farmer's soil that like is selling like vegetables to your grocery store. It's going to be like your milk farmer who's now soil is soiled by the toxicity, or your river that like provides your local water. And that's kind of a major problem, not only for those specific communities, for everyone in general.
And how did you get involved with this project?
I moved to Montreal in January and got connected with a friend who had heard about a group organizing and planning against pipelines, and I like jumped on board the first second, because I had been part of demonstrations and protests in BC against Northern Gateway Pipeline, which is a big proposed project from Alberta to the west coast, and I have a really big passion. I got really educated on the subject and really found like this is an awful thing that we're doing to our mother nature, and especially like the Alberta tar sands. Like, it's the most crude oil, it's the dirtiest oil to come out of Canada in the world. And I was demonstrating against it there and had absolutely no idea what was happening in Quebec. I thought like there'd be other environmental issues. I had no idea that there were 2 pipelines being proposed, and one that had already been approved being Line 9. and I like jumped on the chance to like get involved in the actual planning and actual organizing of something against that.
And what's the theater group? You mentioned that before.
I can never remember their name, to
Okay.
be honest, but they work out of a theater of the oppressed style. So it's all interactive theater to really create a discussion and involve people in the issues, even people that would have never participated in theater get involved in these discussions, and they create like theater forums around questions and get people involved in putting their body into the theater and creating imagery that's like really powerful and creates like a thought process that you might never have before.
So is that like kind of like healing the self, healing the whole?
I think part of it is like just creating a consciousness that people haven't engaged with before. It's something that we're gonna include in all of our stops along our walk. Is creating this interactive theater to get people, really gets people involved in the question.
Okay.
People that have maybe never even asked the question before, creating that visual and then asking them what they think about it and engaging them in that subject. I'm not saying that there's a right or a wrong answer, just creating a discussion. And part of our idea is to talk with communities about what is civil disobedience to you and how do you guys want to engage in civil disobedience in regards to this pipeline specifically, or just like fossil fuel industry in general. And so what's really interesting is to be able to see what each community is doing and how it's different too. Because I'm sure there's communities that are really radical and already really mobilized, and there's going to be other communities that are just learning about the issue and maybe want to take a different approach, but then it's creating these links between all of these different communities that either are looking to do mobilization on the same level or just linking the like really radicals with the calm ones to be able to like learn from each other and create that network throughout Quebec. So if this pipeline gets approved, despite what the government wants or what the companies say, like the citizens will be like engaged and mobilized and linked together in opposition, and it won't pass. And that's what's happening in BC. I mean, with Keystone in the United States, like they've never seen a social movement and like an engagement this big around environmental issues, and it's probably not going to pass Keystone because there's states that are now opposing it. There's farmers and people like blockading on the land that like will not let this pass. So now they're searching for other sources for it to escape, and we want to create that same momentum so that pipeline can't be constructed, and then they have no way to get out their oil, and then they can't expand and they can't make the environment any worse. So that's part of this. As much as we're like a local movement, we're part of this bigger movement against oil and like dirty energy, but also want to like propose alternatives to these people.
So do you think raising like awareness about this could also help like raise awareness about other issues? And
it's like it's one of the first steps, because when you talk about opposing pipelines or opposing tar sands or opposing oil and dirty energy use in general, the question always comes, well, what is the alternative? Because like I have to drive my car to work every day, and we want to also like bring in those alternatives like electric cars or hybrid cars, even as that's like our only option right now, or riding your bike even better. Or part of the idea of walking is to like take our time and walk places. Like our lives in our society move so fast, and humans are not meant to move that fast. I mean, with our 2 feet, we can only walk so fast. And I think that's part of like that realization that life could move a little bit slower, and they don't need to expand the tar sands and send their oil out to everyone in the world as fast as possible, but just to like enjoy the nature that's around us and like cultivate your own food. So you don't need to drive to the grocery store to get your groceries, because it's in your backyard and you can just walk there. And there's part of that like change in mentality and a social change that needs to happen that I think first starts for a lot of people in a variety of issues, and some of that is opposing like pipelines as well. It's a way of engaging.
And what are you guys doing to raise awareness, like during the march? What specifically?
We're going to be doing shows in a lot of the towns that we pass through, engaging people through art forms and music. We're going to be doing parades in a lot of the towns that we come into, and creating choreographed dances to like engage people in a visual sense as well, and then to get them to a show in the evening from musical performances from their like local artists that also can then engage them in the issues. At one point we're going to do a intergenerational bingo night with the some older folks in one of the towns that lent us their community hall. So that'll be like another way to engage like probably a generation that we normally as youth that are mostly engaged in this project don't get to. So that'll be fun as well.
Cool. And can you talk a little bit about what kind of communities are being affected by this? Like,
yeah, so we're passing through 32 communities.
Wow.
Along our walk. So we're starting in Kakuna, Quebec, which is where they want to build a petroleum port along the St. Lawrence River. And right now there's a big issue around the belugas that are going to be affected because that's like their beluga habitat. And right now they're doing research to build the port, which includes dropping cannons into the water where in the middle of the season of beluga reproduction, which is go corporations, you have a way of fucking up every time. But so that's a major community, and then walking all along the proposed route, not even being able to hit all of the communities that are going to be affected, but really trying to do our best to touch them. And I know passing around on a tour and visiting some of the people, there was one home that we went to, and they showed us like on the other side of the street, right there is where they want to build the pipeline, and that's directly affected. That's like their land, you know, like their kids play in the field across the street. And what are they going to do if the pipeline spills there? You know, like that I can see as like the directly impacted. I'm not even that directly impacted, but I feel that connection. So I'm sure that we're not even going to be able to reach the amount of people that are directly impacted, secondarily impacted.
What drives you personally to do this? Like, why are you so committed to it?
Just a goal of making the world a little bit better and trying. I think a lot of it is like when I came into it and they talked about how the idea was to really create a citizen movement and speak to the citizens and get engaged on a grassroots like citizen level. I really like bonded with that idea because I think that that's what's gonna like. There's a lot of issues, you know, that I care about, environmental, social. I want to create peace on earth like everyone else, but like this is one of those ways where I really feel like if we empower citizens to do it themselves, even in this one case, it can create a momentum and a consciousness that can lead to like greater involvement and inclusion when they see like, hey, I actually have the power to stop this pipeline, for example, or I have the power to like disengage with corporations and grow my own garden, or like stop buying gas for my car because I'm going to ride my bike to work more. Like all of those like options and that empowerment of people where they see like the power they really have is, I think, is like really moving and why I really wanted to engage in this project in particular. But there's so many projects that I would love to engage in that you can't either.
Okay, cool. Do you have anything else to add? Or?
No, you can find us on Facebook.
Awesome. Where can we find you on Facebook?
Marche des peuples pour la terre mère.
And what's the name of it, maybe in English? Like just the...
People's March for Mother Earth.
Awesome. Thanks.
Cool.
Thank you.